Hello, everyone. Hello, it's 12 p.m. It's noon, and it's time to harness your power of academic Twitter. I have my panelists, Lisa Dixon, Jeffrey Cohen, Marwah Abdalla, Paul Applebaum, joining us. I am Vincent Sanders. I'm your moderator. Let's get going. Welcome to the power of harnessing Twitter, academic Twitter. My name is Vincent Sanders. Once again, I am the brand new Associate Director of Digital Content Strategy at New York State Psychiatric Institute, Columbia University. First, I'd like to say I admire everyone in this panel, everyone's work on Twitter. The last few weeks, I've been monitoring your accounts. I've been stalking you somewhat and trying to do my homework. And you guys have all done your due diligence to be here. You guys are all very impressive on the platform. And so in this workshop, you'll hear from shortly after they speak. I'll be going over some points and getting started with creating your profile. And please make sure you stick around if you want to go over anything that has to do with beginning materials or more. Let's get into our presentation. Being on Twitter is a way of conducting global office hours. That's our Kevin M. Cruz. That is our Princeton historian. Sorry, let me put this on slideshow. And so he's pretty big on Twitter, actually. He has over 500,000 followers, or no, around 500,000 followers. As you can see in the graphic, he has a pinned tweet that went pretty viral, that went over 17,000 likes. It's been retweeted 6,000 times. So again, he is saying that global office hours, you are able to share your work with anyone across the world. You're able to conduct business. You're able to share any information that you have with your scholars, your colleagues, any work that you're being presented on, journals, scholarly journals, put that out there, tidbits, tips, anything that we're going over right now. That's the beautiful part of Twitter. In this workshop, you will learn how to get started, if not already on the platform, identify how Twitter can help you, effectively use hashtags. You don't want to bombard that. You don't want it to look like a spam email. And the do's and don'ts of the platform. My colleagues of the panel will be able to touch on that. Why scholars use social media. In a survey by the journal Nature, scholars who regularly visited social media sites were quizzed about their activities. By far, the most popular use was tweeting about their research and commenting on others' work. So if you see in the graphic, you see varying degrees of why people have used this. And the most at 58% was posting their content, posting the work that they have done. Again, here are our panelists, Dr. Marwah Abdalla, Dr. Paul Applebaum, Dr. Jeffrey Cohen, and Dr. Lisa Dixon. Dr. Abdalla is the Director of Education for the Cardiac Intensive Care Unit and a faculty member of the Center of Behavioral Cardiovascular Health at Columbia. She also knows how to use Twitter Spaces. She's very good at that, so we'll be touching on that. If you have any questions, we have a Q&A. You can put that in the Q&A, and she'll be able to answer that for you. It's sort of like Clubhouse, but again, she'll be expanding on that. Dr. Applebaum, he is somewhat of an influencer, actually. He's in an internet article. We'll get to that soon of how he's someone that you should be following on Twitter. So Dr. Applebaum is the chair of the DSM Steering Committee for the American Psychiatric Association and a member of the Standing Committee of Ethics of the World Psychiatric Association. Dr. Jeffrey Cohen, another Twitter superstar. Dr. Cohen focuses on adapting evidence-based psychotherapies to better help sexual and gender minority people, and passionate about the use of technology, as you see today, to increase access to effective mental health treatment. Last but not least, Lisa Dixon. Dr. Dixon oversees activities for the New York State Office of Mental Health in implementing evidence-based practices for individuals diagnosed with serious mental illness. And her research focuses on improving the quality of care for these individuals. Very impressive people, but let's get to why we're using Twitter. You want to disseminate information. You want to share your research. Put it out there for the world, guys. Use a hashtag, get onto a conference. Most of us are using this live as virtual as possible. We're not able to attend these things in person. So this is the best way to share this globally, share it with your peers. Post interesting articles and start a conversation. You see a Twitter thread that either tells a story or it starts a conversation that you can interact with. Dr. Jeff Cohen, I see him online. He's constantly retweeting. He's constantly acknowledging people's work and trying to start a conversation, either if he's trying to either debate a point or he's just trying to piggyback and try to complement a study that's out there. Knowledge acquisition. Keep abreast of colleagues' research. Discover public works in your field of study. It's pretty, Google is a great tool. Search engines are great tools, but Twitter is better when it's coming from your peers. Again, you can go on a hashtag, you can type in their name. You can even go in the query and type in a certain subject and those people will come up. Even a conference, the title of a conference, that will come up as well. And you will end up in that thread and you will be in a pool of your peers to collaborate. Professional networking, conference and events. We went over that. Again, a lot of us are in the virtual space. So we want to make these conferences. We still want to share that information. We still want to see our colleagues. And this is the best way to do it. Seek out collaborators, people you haven't met before. I see a lot of our panelists right here. I've been on their Twitter accounts and they're constantly seeking people that are aligned with their fields and are able to disseminate this kind of information out there and create a positive conversation. Advocacy and awareness. We promote a lot of articles on the Twitter page, whether they come from journals, whether they come from, again, stakeholders or conferences. This is a way to engage with them very quickly and efficiently. And search tweets with influential reach. Again, Dr. Applebaum is considered an influencer with his 3,000 followers, and he has a lot of people in the field looking for him for advice and for, again, collaboration. So an influencer is someone, it could be micro or macro, they are someone leading the field. And so on Twitter, these panelists right here are leading the field in Twitter and where you should get that kind of information, especially when it comes to therapy. Why use Twitter? We're still on that. Highly tweeted articles are 11 times more likely to be cited in scientific journals, and that's from the Journal of Medical Internet Research. So if you are again, you don't want to plagiarize, you want to always stick to the book when you're trying to cite information. People, I mean, you won't get caught with that, but like people will call you out for it. But if you are citing this, if you are being professional about it, you have a lot more time, a lot more likely to get that exposure. There's lots of departments, there's lots of people to follow. You can create a list. There is a feature on Twitter where you can put people without even following them as a guideline of who is aligned with your mission, with your department and with your subject and your field. So here are the people. We're giving you like kind of a cheat sheet. Melissa Arbuckle, Dr. Diana Samuel, the department chairs. We have Columbia Child Psych. We have Columbia Med. So again, these will pop up in your algorithm. These will pop up in your feed, and they will create a space where you're not having so much clutter. You're having the information right there directly to you. So if you want, you can just look for them. If you can click on the Twitter link, again, that will, we put it in the field already. It's Columbia Psych. So we typed in Columbia Psych, and you'll be able to find our panelists. You'll be able to find their work. You'll be able to find any interactions they have within Columbia Psych. All right, we are winding down and we're about to get to our panelists. So again, if you want to look, there's an article out there, the top 10 therapists to follow. And one of them is Dr. Paul Applebaum. We also have Jeffrey Lieberman. These are also a great example of how your Twitter profile should look. Dr. Jeffrey Lieberman has a nice cover photo. We have the tweets and replies. That's actually impressive that Dr. Applebaum is only following 36 accounts and he has over 3,000 people following him. Again, that is influencer level. People are looking for him to the information. He's kind of the lighthouse. And so try to go look for that. Try to get that and make your Twitter experience as professional as possible. All right, I would like to give it up to the panelists now. This is the part that you have all been waiting for. We're going to start off with Dr. Dixon. And please start off with any experiences you have with the platform, any tips that you'd like to start off with.
Sure. Can everybody, I think I should be able to be heard. Hi, everybody. And I want to thank you all for inviting me to be on this panel. I have to say I was a little surprised because I don't really think that much about my use of Twitter, but and I'm actually very eager to learn from the other panelists today. So just a few points. I did want to start out by saying that I apparently joined Twitter in 2012, but I don't think I did anything. I don't think I used it. I don't even know that I ever went there other than to make my profile until probably 5 or 6 years later. But when I became the editor of the journal Psychiatric Services, I realized, and my philosophy in becoming editor of that journal is that I was really trying to push from pages to practice. So I'm very aware as someone who works in the world of community psychiatry and mental health that, you know, an academic article is an academic article. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have any impact. And so I thought, well, I could go from pages to tweets to practice and try to, you know, expand the reach of the articles in my journal. And, you know, I thought that in particular, because like the audience for this journal is, you know, people from all walks of mental health. I mean, all walks of life, but in general, like I'm not just interested in psychiatrists or researchers who do X, Y, and Z, but really the community of people who support individuals with mental health problems. And so I thought that Twitter would be a good place to sort of spread that word. And I really, at the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing. Not that I necessarily know what I'm doing now, but I just was like tweeting articles and I could never get it right. I'd try to get the image and then the link would be like 3 lines and I was really, it was a mess. And so but I've worked to try to get a little bit better and more focused. And for me, I feel like I'm so busy, as everybody here is, that I have to have a way to contain it. And so I have certain ground rules. I have certain ways that I deal with Twitter, and I'm very, very religious about it. I don't exceed it, and but I'm also equally attentive to it. So I mean, the details of my religious practice, maybe I can just very briefly review. So I only retweet articles. So I've worked with the journal. They tweet. They have a nice picture. They, you know, and I review the language in the initial tweet because, you know, you have very few words, but they have to be good, those words. So I wait and I get a notification when there's an article that's tweeted from the journal, and then I know that I have something to do, and I go and I retweet. And the fun thing about retweeting in this context is that I can have my own voice. Okay, so I don't, the content of the article is there, right? And the person can look down and see what the article is about, but then I can be myself within constraints because I'm the editor of the journal. But I think that one of the things that I've noticed is that you know, it's good to be a little edgy. It's good to be a little provocative. It's good to get people's attention. And then they can form their own opinion. I mean, again, for me, at least, there's a fine balance here as an editor. You know, but you don't want to be boring. Okay, like that's I would say probably a rule that probably most of us could agree with. So I don't make use of all the hashtags and I can't stand getting tweets with like a list of 1 million people that it's at this, or, you know, hashtag. I don't even, I can probably be more effective, but for me, it's been really fun. I feel like it's given me a structure within which to have a voice. And it doesn't, I mean, I was thinking about, well, how is what I'm saying relevant to any of you guys who are not journal editors? But in other words, I think that the lesson for me is like is if there's something that really matters to you, or if there's a topic, or if there's an area, or if you have a cause, it's sort of a good way to feel like, marshal your resources and play a role.
Yes, once again, hashtags allow for discovery. If users are following a person, a hashtag, or in a professional area, they might find it sooner or than traditional internet browsing. But if you're just retweeting, that's fine too. That actually incorporates everything that was embedded before, and you're just retweeting that same hashtag information. So they'll be able to find that.
But retweeting with comments, like retweeting with, not just like retweeting.
Yeah, with quotes.
Yeah, like exactly, retweeting with quotes.
Absolutely. Yes, you add to the conversation. We love that. So Dr. Cohen, please give us your experiences with the platform.
Sure. Yeah. I really appreciate hearing Dr. Dixon's perspectives. And so I joined Twitter in 2018 after attending an ABCT, Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies conference, where we were really talking about some of Dr. Dixon's points around how do we reach people, right? Journals don't always reach the public as quickly as we would like them to. And we all know that science, and especially science around mental health, does not reach the public as quickly as we'd like it to do. There can be a big gap, as I think most people on this call know, between research and clinical practice. So I think I joined Twitter for two main reasons. I would say one was to communicate with the public, to share information about mental health treatment so people can find treatments that actually work for them. And then two was also to connect with academic colleagues. And well, I certainly can't read anyone's mind, right? No one in the history of time has ever, observed someone else's thoughts. I sometimes imagine that people join Twitter for different reasons. And I see colleagues on Twitter, and I sort of think maybe they're really intentional about wanting to be in the academic space. I see them writing about things like tenure, for instance. And then I see other folks who are writing a little bit less about those types of things. So I'm kind of curious, and I guess my style is to kind of engage as we go. So if people are comfortable, I would love people to enter into the chat. Like, why are you here? Like, somehow you decided to take time out of your day. I know everyone's so busy. Like, why are you here? Why did you join Twitter? If you feel comfortable. And maybe I can ask the panelists to model how to do this. If people be willing just to enter into the chat, and then that way I can like shape what I'm going to talk about. So just into the chat, why did you join Twitter? Who are you hoping to reach? Is it the public? Is it other academics?
Great. And no, that's a beautiful thing. We definitely would love, again, please, right next to the raise hand, put in the Q&A, and Dr. Cohen will shape his discussion over that.
Great. Okay, yeah. So I guess you have to do it in the Q&A. Thank you for clarifying, Vincent. So it looks like, okay, they're all coming in the chat, actually. So I want to promote the use of virtual reality and the use of psychotherapy for anxiety. I want to know a lot about that. And I think a lot of people do. So I think lots of positive judgments. Let's all read them. So a fellow we work with, Dr. Jenna Hennessy, says make mental health topics more accessible to the public. And that very much aligns with my interests. To network, I get my science from Twitter. To tweet out internships, absolutely. And that's something I do on Twitter as well, although I realize that's not going to be applicable to everyone. If a colleague has an open fellowship that's relevant to the people that hang with me on Twitter, then I might share that. So this is really helpful. So what I thought I would do is maybe just share my screen and go through like a few different tweets and kind of how I approached it. I think there's a lot of ways to do this. Like, I'm a big fan of dialectical behavior therapy, and dialectics just means there's more than one way to do everything. So I don't think that there's like one way. It's just figuring out like what works for you. And also I'll say that the type of therapy that I do probably influences the way I present on the platform. In the prep call, we were sort of talking about what do we disclose and what do we don't disclose. And so I think irrespective of theoretical orientation, most of us would probably agree disclosure, we want to benefit the patient or should have some function around the patient. And so usually what I'm disclosing is consistent with what I would be disclosing in the types of behavior therapies I do. I know that can vary depending on an orientation. Okay, so, and the other thing is that I want to decrease stigma around mental illness. So sometimes I'll be vulnerable and share some of my own experiences. So let me share a couple of tweets. Let's see. So maybe I'll start off, okay, this was one where I saw this really cool article that Dr. Barbara Stanley did about coping strategies. And this was really interesting to me because we know that coping skills help. However, which skills help with what? That's actually usually a huge question. And a lot of the skill-based interventions, we don't actually know which skills are the key pieces, especially in DBT. So I thought this was really useful because it showed that our distraction skills can actually be more helpful than mindfulness skills when someone's feeling suicidal. And I tried to write this in a way that I thought many people could understand, even if they don't have an MD or PhD or equivalent. And then sometimes I'll screenshot the abstract and link to the article so those people who are interested in the research can access it. You can get into like a character count. And so, there are other people from Columbia and also from other schools at Columbia in this. So what I did was I tagged them in the photo because I couldn't fit them all into the character count, but I tagged them in the photo, the ones who are on Twitter. So that way they're aware. And I don't, to Dr. Dixon's point, I don't usually at people unless, I'm promoting their work. One of the things I wanted to talk about was analytics. So often you could tweet something and actually maybe I'll go on to a different, well, I'll stay here. You could tweet something and you might think, oh, just 67 people saw that. Actually, there's a lot of lurkers on Twitter. Put it another way, there's a lot of people who might be on Twitter and they don't tell you they're on Twitter. I've had, someone I went to fellowship with told me she saw one of my tweets. I can't find her on Twitter. I didn't know she was on Twitter, but there's people who somehow access the platform. And so you actually have a much bigger reach than the number of people who like your tweets. So I want everyone to be aware of analytics. So that's under view tweet activity. So actually 13,000 people were able to see this tweet. Okay, so that's a lot more. That's a lot larger reach than what you might think. So that's one thing that I do on Twitter. I haven't done as much of doing abstracts recently because I think I've maybe focusing now more on helping the public understand mental health treatment. So along those lines, I try to share things that are really understandable and things that I'm passionate about. Like I really love this water bottle from Columbia, the School of Public Health, health is a human right. It's not, I think it can help humanize you to share content like this. Again, it might not be consistent with like your personal brand. And even though it says only 37 people saw it, it was actually, oh, those are the likes, sorry. Even though it seems like only 37 people liked it, actually quite a number of people saw it. The other thing I found is if you just put something like self-promotional, like, hey, check out this new study I did, that doesn't usually get a lot of traction. And that could be for a number of reasons. I think we live in like a culture where we're scrolling and unfortunately people aren't always clicking. So it can be really helpful to put content in the actual tweet. So here's another example of that. There was an article that doctors Melissa Arbuckle and Deborah Cabanas wrote that I really loved. And also I found Dr. Cabanas and Dr. Lloyd Setter's workshop on communicating with the public to be really helpful, although that focuses on writing articles. We've also discussed how to communicate more broadly. And so I think some of the tips I've learned from Dr. Cabanas have been helpful. Actually, I'll pause to share one of them, which is if you're going to use jargon, you have to explain it. Otherwise, don't use jargon. So I only use jargon if it's a term that I want everyone to know about. So this article they wrote, which you might have seen, was about wellness in the 80-hour work week and medical residency programs. So rather than just saying this tweet here, I really appreciate that they spoke about this, which probably wouldn't get a lot of traction. I tried to link it to my experience in providing therapy for medical residents, and then share a couple key takeaways of the article. And so this one, you can see it says 58 likes, but actually almost 10,000 people saw it. So I think my key point here is just that the reach of Twitter can be really huge, especially if you can put some content into the tweet. At least that's what I found can work for me. This was a one about CBT. therapists, where at the very end, I put in an article that I wrote. If I think I would have just put in the article, I don't know how many people want to go read. I hope a lot of people want to read The Behavior Therapist. And also I think starting off with a little bit more of a hot take around thoughts can be accurate, and especially for minoritized people, thoughts can be accurate, and maybe we need to start acknowledging that reality can draw people in. So the last one, I guess I'll just share, which the internet's a weird place. I don't know exactly why this like turned out the way that it did. It's my guess would be the reason this did so well was because it brought in a personal perspective. So in this tweet, I disclose that I've been to therapy, and also because we have credentials as psychologists or psychiatrists or cardiologists, we have an expert opinion. So I think we're both vulnerable and we have expertise. So in this tweet, I talked about different types of therapy. I think often the public doesn't know that there's different types of therapy. And then I tried to summarize 5 therapies that obviously there's more therapies than this, and I said it's not exhaustive, but to me, and also at Columbia, I think 5 that I really hope people will know about are CBT, DBT, ACT, interpersonal therapy, and of course, psychoanalysis. And just I shared a little bit about them. And so it's crazy to see that it looks like a lot of people saw it, but if you go into the analytics, it's even more people. It's over 3 million people. So I really find Twitter's a great way to share psychological and medical science, and that's why I'm on the platform. It's also been a great way to connect with colleagues, and there's been several conference presentations or relationships that have strengthened out of it. So I will, pause there and pass it back to Vincent. You might be muted.
Vincent, you're muted. Nobody can hear you.
So thank you for that, Dr. Cohen. Before we move on to Dr. Applebaum, I want to show you exactly what Jeff was talking about as far as analytics are concerned. You can type in your username into this search bar. You just replace the username in the bold letters, in the capital letters, or you can go to this link right here, and it's and the easiest way, like Dr. Cohen showed, is to click on your view activity, and it will show your impressions, it will show your engagement, it will show the likes. That's all important. The impressions are whoever it reached, the views are whoever was lurking, whoever was the ghost follower out there. Yes, you can access the platform. Same thing for Instagram. You don't have to have an account. You can preview different content. And you saw with Dr. Cohen, it was a thread. It wasn't just the information just in the tweet. You were able to click into that, and you're able to see a thread of discussion, and he was able to provide more information past the 240 characters. Now, let me get to Dr. Paul Applebaum, please.
Oh, hi. So in my family, I'm the piker when it comes to Twitter. I've got 3,700 followers, 6 more since this webinar began 28 minutes ago. So thank you for that. But my sons are both journalists, and the older one has 111,000 followers, and the younger one only 51,000 followers. And even my daughter, who is in a different field entirely and tweets jokes on parenting Twitter, which is sort of the other end of the pole from academic Twitter, has 12,000 followers. So I'm clearly the low-ranking person on the totem pole when we all get together. But that's okay, because I have very specific goals that I want to accomplish by being on Twitter, and also things I don't want to do. So my specific goals are, as you heard is common for academics, to be able to get my work out there when I publish something new, or I'm giving a talk, or I'm going to do an interview, or some media piece has appeared. But I'm also interested in promoting more than just my work. I'm interested in promoting ideas as well. And there are some things I care a lot about. Gun violence, particularly when it's directed against people with mental illnesses, is an enormous issue as far as I'm concerned. The underfunding and undertreatment of people with mental illness is another issue of great concern to me. And so when media stories appear about these issues, or professional journal articles, I recently, within the last day or so, tweeted out a good study that looked at the extent to which people with mental illness were more likely to die from COVID-19, which is more than just sad. It actually suggests a course of action. Namely, we ought to be thinking about them as a vulnerable population and moving them up the list as far as efforts to ensure protection and vaccination. So those are issues that I care about and that I use Twitter to promote. What I don't want, the two things I want to be careful about, I am careful about when I use Twitter, are first, I don't want it to be a time sink. So as Vincent noted, I follow very few people or entities. There's some journals that will regularly tweet out their tables of contents. I follow them. I follow my major funding agencies. That seems prudent to do. I follow a relatively small number of others. I don't want it to be a time sink. And going along with that, when I tweet, I want to tweet in an efficient way. And so sometimes I tweet daily, sometimes less frequently. If you follow me, you're certainly not going to be bombarded with lots of tweets. I tend not to use hashtags because when I read other people's tweets with hashtags in them, they are harder to read. I like to be able to scan tweets quickly. I have no question that limits the number of people who follow me because it's harder to find, but that's a compromise I'm willing to make for the sense of being able to do this efficiently and get on to other things. The other issue, which somebody raised in the Q&A already, but which has been an ongoing concern for me that I think is worth mentioning, is that I treat patients actively. And I am always aware when I tweet that my patients, one or more of them, may see what I'm tweeting. And in fact, I have a particular patient who will frequently tell me that she saw something that I tweeted. She's figured out who my kids are, and she will tell me that she sees something that they've tweeted as well. It's a very different world now than it was when I started out in psychiatry, when our lives were largely private. And so I ask myself before I tweet, is this something that I would be concerned about a patient seeing? I try to maintain a professional attitude and approach, even when I'm commenting on things that I may care about a great deal. That means I usually avoid joking around on Twitter, although that is certainly one way to get more followers, is to be an amusing Twitter personality. To me, that's inconsistent with being a therapist and having patients who are likely to see this. I also find that the other people who see my tweets are journalists who are writing stories, and I've had them come to me for interviews and quotes, having seen me comment on Twitter about an issue. And since I occasionally do forensic work and find myself in the courtroom, you bet your bottom dollar that attorneys for the other side of whatever case I'm involved with are looking at my Twitter feed as well and hoping to find something there that they can catch me up on. So it's a very public forum and something that you wouldn't want your patient to bring in to you, and you wouldn't want to be questioned about under oath is probably not something that you should be tweeting out. But within those constraints, within those parameters, I have found it to be an extremely useful tool, and I've enjoyed it.
Hello. So before we move on to Dr. Abdalla, we have a couple of sites, a couple of accounts to follow as well. We have the APA Psychiatric, we have the AACAP, and we have New York Times Science. Those are other relevant accounts that you can look for that kind of information. And to touch on Dr. Applebaum, some people create a separate private profile. That's not what I'm suggesting, by the way, but some people do that. It protects their tweets. But Dr. Applebaum is hitting it right on the head. This is a professional space. There's not that much leeway. Obviously, a lot of us like amusing accounts, entertainment accounts, but when it comes to sharing with your colleagues and peers, it's always the best practice to stay away from controversial material and content. So let's get down to someone that is, again, everybody's a superstar on this panel, but I'm very intrigued by the Twitter space, and that's sorry that I rearranged the order, but I felt like that was something very prudent to this conversation. So Dr. Abdalla, could you please touch on Twitter Spaces and how you utilize the platform, which got you started?
Sure. Well, thank you again for inviting me as the only non-psychiatrist on the panel. It's a pleasure to be here and talk to distinguished colleagues and learn from distinguished colleagues. So I was actually a very reluctant Twitter user, and actually only joined 2 years ago. And I was sort of asked and then firmly told because I am part of a research group that part of sort of the engagement for the whole research group was to have, their faculty increase their visibility and their professional engagement. And still, I was very reluctant. And it was finally when I went into a conference, a Harold Amos conference, in which I'm a part of, we actually had a formal Twitter conversation, something like this, a panel of people in the room. There's maybe like 60 scholars in there, and the room was divided. And we had a nice debate about the merits of using Twitter or not. And there were people who were influencers in the room, and there were not. And then there was actually someone who's written a book outside of medicine about digital kindness, and the idea that when you sort of how do you engage appropriately on Twitter from a non-medical perspective. And it was really intriguing. And so I sort of, put my toes in the water, and still sort of, the first year and a half was like, I'm not really sure, is this for me, or not. And I think it's part of the best advice I got actually from that panel, and what I still, sort of rely on is something that both Dr. Dixon and Dr. Applebaum said, is that sort of, you really need to know who you are and what you want out of this platform, but also what are the rules and regulations that you want to put on yourself. And so one of my colleagues, for example, who is a micro influencer, she actually does not download Twitter onto her phone at all. She just sees it on desktop, and she's regimented as to when she goes on. And I sort of follow that, is that if I have something that I would like to say or engage in, I'll go on. But there are also moments where I'm incredibly busy, I'm writing a grant and things like that, and I've turned it off. And I've actually had turned off, for the past, couple of weeks. I was like, I'm not going to necessarily engage right now because I have, personal and professional responsibilities that are more important for me. And I think we first need to just say that's okay, right? However you want to engage, it's your platform. And I think sometimes people forget that there's this this feeling like I got to compete as to how I should do this, or my followers or whatever. Engage in the way that is meaningful to you, understanding what your professional and personal boundaries are. And I think for different divisions and departments, it's probably going to be different. And I totally encourage everyone who's attending, even for myself, to think about that, but also continuously as your time on the platform sort of evolves. I also knew for me is that I was more shy on a written format. And I know that sounds strange as an academic researcher, where most of our time is spent, writing, academic work. But for me, it just felt a little bit strange. I'm also an ICU physician, and I had this feeling of like, this tension of where I'm writing, my patients could be seeing it, et cetera, or other people off the platform. And really, what is the message I wanted to declare? And then I think for me, what it's been helpful is that in the past year with COVID-19 is obviously, as you mentioned, everyone else has done, is really engage and learn more about science. I think in particular, the platform showed itself in the pandemic that a lot of people had to disseminate information quickly. And for me, it actually helped expand my collaborations based on some work that I'd done in mental health, which I'd never done up until the COVID-19 pandemic, to actually interact with people in this department in a way that I would never have done if I was just siloed in the cardiovascular world, in which I was in for about a year or so. So I think it's helpful about expanding and knowing how do you sort of advocate. And I think there is a Q&A that we'll probably get back to later on about that. Twitter Spaces is, I think, what I want to sort of, expand on a little bit. And this is really the audio version of Twitter. So we have to acknowledge that there's some people who are much more comfortable writing, and there are some people who are much more comfortable speaking. They just have that flow, and that's okay. And some of you are blessed with both. And I found that it was just easier to express my thoughts in real time, but realizing that obviously this is a public platform, right? So again, whatever you would not want to say in public should not be even said in Twitter Spaces or any of these audio platforms. And I think people forget that. And for me, I had an opportunity to be one of the first 300 beta testers for Twitter Spaces back in December. So I was able to actually help craft the platform and continue to do so since it is a very relatively new thing within Twitter. And so for those who are not familiar, it's actually accessible only right now via your phone, either on Android or an iPhone. But there's actually a function on it when you come to compose a tweet. There are these nice little purple dots. And in fact, this whole conversation we've been having today on Zoom could have been on audio version on Twitter Spaces. And I have done that over the past several months, is engage colleagues, but also people who are outside of medicine, because it is open to the public. So I've been in spaces in audio platforms where I'm engaging with someone who is a macro influencer outside of medicine and understanding, what is their perspective about science, right? Especially I think it was really interesting to be in these spaces during the early part of vaccines. And so I think I offer that, and we can, do another panel at some point, hopefully, where people are really exploring that there is a written component, but there is actually an opportunity to engage and in real time have a free-flowing conversation, right? That can be informative and expand also who you're networking with in a way that I think sometimes, the written algorithm doesn't allow you to do so, right? Because what pops up on your feed is based on who you're following, who you've recently interacted with, but the audio portion of it allows you to have people who may just walk into the room and you've never met them before. And I've had actually a lot of people that I've now interact with on a daily basis, I've met from the Twitter Spaces platform, that I don't necessarily do so with the written platform. You're muted, Vincent. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdalla. I would like to show a couple more slides, and then we could get some more, we'll answer some live questions, and we could, let's get some more tips. So again, there were some people that asked for the Twitter analytics. Once again, type in your username to replace that big capitals right there, username, and you will find your personal analytics. Again, Dr. Jeffrey Cohen described how you can easily do it within the tweet. That is view activity. You can check that out. But also you can get this presentation after our webinar. I'll be sending that via email. All you have to do is request it. I will do that. So, and also one more time, I would like to show the accounts to follow. Aside from Dr. Lieberman, our chair, and Dr. Applebaum. So again, these are the individuals and departments. You don't have to make a list. You could follow them yourself. Or again, you can make that list and it will still show up in your feed. And you will find all these influencers, all these people that will help you on your journey through Twitter, and that will help you disseminate that information that is useful to your audience.
We're not seeing your screen. If you're showing slides
I'm
now.
so sorry. All right. Thank you, Dr. Applebaum. So again, these are the accounts you should follow. So we will be sending this presentation out later. You can copy and paste from there. It's easy to share. Again, this at the link at the bottom, you can search for these people. You can type in Columbia Psych. They're all associated with the account. Every panelist here, everybody from the department. Again, you should follow Dr. Lieberman, our chair, and you should follow accounts like these. Dr. Applebaum, Dr. Dixon, Dr. Cohen, very active on there, and Dr. Abdalla, even though she is not part of the psychiatry field. Again, Twitter Spaces, Twitter Fleet, these are all components borrowed from other social platforms, trying to make you stay on one platform and to be able to start that conversation. Once again, those are our profiles. All right, getting started on Twitter, please download the app or go online. As Dr. Abdalla said before, you don't even have to get on the app. You can do it from your desktop if you'd like. Create an account, write a professional bio or blurb, upload your photo, something recognizable. If you're coming up with a Twitter handle, that is your name that is displayed for everyone to see, for some people to click into to access your Twitter feed. So you wanted something, again, you want something recognizable and you want something catchy, and my colleague, Carla Cantor, my boss, she recommended something that you would want 5 years from now, something that you would want to be proud of 5 years from now. It's not a tattoo, but it's definitely something that you can change the name, by the way. It's not set in stone, but you want to watch out for that, because somebody might take your handle, trademark and all on the platform. But yeah, definitely something that people can find you, something professional, and that people want to follow. Follow accounts of users and interests. That's back to the page of making the department list, and make your first tweet when ready. Take your time. As the panelists have described before, they've told you that they don't tweet every day. And again, Dr. Applebaum has great traction, great engagement. So does the rest of the panelists. So you don't need to tweet every day. There are people who do that, and it ups their followership, but in the academic Twitter world, that is not necessary. Again, we will be sending this out at the end, but these are just a few tips to get started. I saw in a couple of people's profile the viral tweet that Jeff put out. You want to pin that to the top of your profile. You want to get even more exposure than it's already gotten. The tweets can get lost in the shuffle, in the sauce. And so if you pin it up on the top, that will be visible for everyone to see your feed no matter what, until you unpin it yourself. Use your 280 characters wisely. It used to be 140, now it's 180, and now you're able to expand your thoughts. You can also do it on another tweet on the thread of the conversation. And most importantly, hashtags and handles only as needed. Dr. Applebaum also touched on that. Yeah, no, it could look wordy, it could look out of place, it could be hard to read. So only use hashtags when they're necessary, when you want it to be specifically found in a criteria that might not be accessible in a search query on a search engine. And if any of our panelists have to add on to any of this, please interrupt me. That's totally fine. So the anatomy, I wanted to get a great example of a Twitter profile. Dr. Abdalla has the pinned tweet. She has the accounts that she wants you to see. Twitter Spaces, the little, oh, sorry, the humble brag. When she joined, when she was hosting, you get to see the people that she's following. This is a great example of a Twitter profile. I suggest people do a cover photo. It's kind of like LinkedIn. It's kind of like other platforms. You don't have to do it, but it livens up the page. We have the viral tweet by Dr. Cohen, and we have a fun tweet that he was collaborating on, retweet. I've seen also on other panelist accounts, yes, internships, jobs. It's not Craigslist, but it's definitely a platform where you can, again, you could piggyback on other people's information, and you can expose something, you could highlight something that people want you to see, and fellowships that people want to join that you wouldn't be able to do either in a mass email or a newsletter. You do that on Twitter and it's easy. Again, we'll send this at the end, but these are key components of vocabulary. These are like your, I heard retweet, you heard a hashtag many times, you heard mentions, followers, replies. Dr. Dixon said that she retweets and she likes to put a quote, something that she would like to contribute to the conversation. You're always able to do that. These are hashtags, kind of another cheat sheet. They always start with a hashtag, but they won't work if you use it in punctuations or symbols. They're very sensitive, by the way, guys. So if you're typing in your hashtag, be very specific of what you're looking for, because it will lead you somewhere where you don't want to be. They're short and easy to remember. And again, back to the panelists' point, limit the hashtags or just don't use them at all. They're not necessary all the time. Okay, analytics. And so I would like to get down to the Q&A. We're going to answer these in live time. And please, any of the panelists who would like to answer first, go ahead. But the first question is, what are your thoughts on connecting with advocates of the populations we work with or you work with? How do you suggest doing this in a professional way?
So I can definitely talk about this, since I recently went through this and doing it across, different specialty. I think you can do it, and the way I did it is to know who are the advocates first that you want to reach. If there is a point or a thread or a conversation that's already going about a topic, I will carefully at the person. I don't spam all the advocates that I want, but in particular, if there is someone that I do want to, have put in, their thoughts into a thread. For some people, their direct messages are open. So obviously you can first, email them through the Twitter app and, give them a heads up or say, hey, I've been following your work. I'd really like to engage you in this. And that sort of establishes a conversation. But if you don't know the person and you are trying to sort of bring them into the conversation, I think it really helps when there's a thread and there's different types of engagement where you know that people are going to be going back and forth. That is a careful way of doing it. And I've been able to do that successfully with, especially in the mental health world, with advocates who were helping sort of ICU physicians and emergency department physicians. Besides Columbia, there were other organizations that were obviously, created, as you all know, and probably many of you have been involved in, that you were able to actually engage through a Twitter thread.
I would just add to that, that I will often to advocacy organizations, not generally speaking individuals, but like NAMI or MHA or organizations that I know have a particular focus. And some of these organizations, advocacy is just one thing that they do. It's not, but if in that space, I think if you want to call attention if there's something on family, or if there's something on, again, peer work or whatever. So I try to direct particular articles that may be of interest to particular advocacy groups toward them.
Anybody else like to answer that question for our audience? All right, we'll be moving on to another question. Would you like to help in the fight to end the stigma of mental health to the public?
I'm sure we all want to help in. I'm not sure if that was also maybe why that person joined Twitter. But it kind of flows really well into the next question. If maybe
Let's do it.
Yeah. So the next question says, as an early career professional in clinical psychology doctoral student, I'm trying to find out how to balance self-disclosure and professional ethics. And I see some mental health professionals self-disclosing significantly. What's the right balance? So I think this is such a great question. And I really appreciated hearing from our panelists, from Dr. Applebaum, Dr. Dixon, Dr. Abdalla. I think this is going to look so different for every person. I think on the one hand, there can be so much stigma around being a provider and having your own mental health or having had your own mental health struggles. And it can be really hard for people to seek help. I think Jessie Gold recently, who's a psychiatrist, recently wrote an article about her own experience of taking medication and how important it was to share that to end the stigma. However, this is someone who's, they're not just starting out on the platform. Similarly, Marsha Linehan's book, Building a Life Worth Living, she really talks about her own experience. I would say my recommendation, though, for someone starting out would be, if this is important to you, if you feel that talking about your own experience, for whatever, maybe because you want to decrease stigma, that's why I mentioned that I've been in therapy. I would say just dip a toe in. And one of the ways you could do that is by tweeting about something that has an end date. So what does that mean? I'm feeling anxious about the world opening up and seeing people that I haven't seen before. I think that's one way to bring in a lived perspective. Again, if it's consistent with you. And there's also another person, Sarah Victor, who just put out a peer-reviewed paper about lived experience among psychologists. So you could check out her Twitter. I definitely think that this is going to be a conversation that we're going to see more and more about. So I really appreciate the question. And I personally think it ends the stigma when we're a little more forthcoming. And of course, when that fits with the type of therapy that we do. So in DBT, part of the teaching points are to share your own how you've used skills in a way to help the people who are in your skills group. Now that could look really different in a different type of therapy. So I'm sure there's going to be other opinions on here, which is kind of what Twitter is about in a way too, different and diverse opinions.
Anybody else? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. And as someone who has been very, very open about my own family experience with schizophrenia, the way I think about this question is forget Twitter. Just how do you feel about self-disclosing? I mean, it's really beyond Twitter. And if you're not comfortable, then don't. And it's not just a Twitter issue. It's a life issue. And I would just say the other thing is that my feelings about this have changed quite a bit over the years. It's not, I would never, what I say about myself is I'm much more open now than I was. And I actually think that was appropriate. So, but don't think of it necessarily as a Twitter question, because it really extends to how you relate to the world as a therapist. There's lots of different ways that people find out about you, not just Twitter.
One of the things to keep in mind, of course, is that once you have tweeted something, it's out there as part of the public record. It is possible to delete tweets, but it's also possible to find them again using the look back machines and other devices that allow you to go back in time and see what was posted at any point in time. And people will take screenshots or have other ways of keeping old tweets that they want to make sure don't disappear from the record. So unlike self-disclosure, one person to another, or therapist to patient, or even to a small group of people, or even in a talk that's not being recorded. When you do it on Twitter, there's an irreversible component to it, which is to say, think about it, talk to people about it, be sure that this is something that you want to do, and that were any of your patients or any of your colleagues or social friends to see it, you would be comfortable with that, because that is always the reality of Twitter.
And I would also add, I think that's eloquently stated. The same thing applies for these audio platforms, whether you're using Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse. People can record. And so if there's something that you don't want, sometimes you're just having a free-flowing conversation and something comes out, it's not stated the way that you want it, and someone's recording, well, guess what, it's there. So I do remind people, about that and let people know.
Great. I'm so happy to answer. That was a great question. Thank you so much, anonymous attendee. You should state your name. It was a phenomenal question. But so we have another question. We have for collaborating with other researchers, what's the experience with Twitter compared to other networks like Researchgate? Is anyone familiar with Researchgate?
Yeah, I'm on Researchgate, and I think it's I don't use it as much as Twitter at all. I think Researchgate just gives you sort of your stats. I don't find that I can engage in a conversation at all, but full disclosure, I don't use it as much as maybe others on the panel or in the audience.
I would agree with that. I don't find that, to Dr. Abdalla's point, I don't find that ResearchGate allows for as much interaction. What it does help with is sharing manuscripts. Of course, they're somewhere on PubMed or wherever they are. However, if you upload a manuscript to ResearchGate, then typically that PDF shows up for anyone. Sometimes I also teach undergrads in the psychology department. They sometimes struggle to, they're still learning how to use PubMed and all of that. So if you have something on ResearchGate, it just makes it more accessible. So I do upload my publications there, but yeah, I don't find it helps me interact with other colleagues as much as Twitter.
And Twitter can be useful for finding out particular pieces of information, or for finding people who are interested in a particular topic. And of course, journalists often use it. They'll post a query and say, anybody who's currently close to the California fires, for example, and would be willing to talk about it, I'm writing a story about it, and please contact me. And of course, researchers can do the same thing. But I think it's more of a finder's service, and that once that contact has been made, you're going to take it off Twitter to then follow up with that person, whether by email or Zoom or phone or some other way. So there is some value there, but more in the sense of casting a broad net to see what might be out there, whether there might be people interested in a topic that you're interested in.
Don't forget, anybody that on Twitter, you can't edit any posts. You can, however, delete and repost. So if there's a mistake you made in an edit, especially in the academic field, you obviously want to be grammatically prepared and correct and be concise. So again, don't be afraid. Don't panic. Take it down, repost. It's okay. So thank you for that question, Akil. We're moving on to the last question so far from Blake Turner. How does one keep a thread of tweets contiguous, as in the example Jeff Cohen showed? That is, how do you prevent them from arriving in people's timeline in a scattershot fashion?
Yeah, hi, Dr. Turner. So I guess maybe screen sharing, this is probably the easiest way to,
Sure.
Let me just make sure I'm on my Twitter. So it's a thread. And so what you want to do is make sure that you're adding another tweet when you, sorry. Okay. Oh, so actually I'm not. Let me hang on one second. Let me go back to my Twitter. Okay. So it's a thread. And so when you push tweet, you write like something, having a great time at this panel. And then you want to add, and then maybe I want it to be a thread. Here's what I learned. And then maybe I'm going to make this 3 tweets so people kind of know that they're looking for 3 tweets. And then I might say, if you are thinking about disclosure, it's not just about Twitter. If you're not, you have to realize it's about your whole life. I think that was a great point that Dr. Dixon, Dr. Applebaum, Dr. Abdalla just made. So I could put, it's a, and I would write that out. And then maybe I have another point. I like to use numbers and emojis because I think that can be fun. However, it's not necessary, but yeah, that's how you do it. And then at the end, you would just say tweet all. You can actually add one later as well if you want to add to your thread, but then what you need to do is make sure that you are adding to the thread, not replying. So like in this tweet, I don't want to just click there, tweet my reply. I need to add to the whole thread, which might be just available on the phone. You want it to say add to the thread, not just, let's see, tweet your, you don't want it to be in a reply. Did that make sense? Okay.
Yes. There's a difference, and the old school way was just hitting reply, and now there's a distinction. You can even draft tweets, and now you can draft the thread as well. That's a relatively new feature. So we're glad. Does anyone else want to answer that question, or was that specific? All right. We have a couple of more questions actually in the chat, if anybody wants to answer those. They were at the beginning. Okay. Oh, I thought these were actually questions. They're not questions. They're just feedback and comments. So
while we're waiting for additional questions, something we haven't mentioned, which is a reality of Twitter, and I think people need to be aware of, is the mobbing phenomenon that can occur. A little bit like crows mobbing a hawk. People circle around and caw at you loudly, and it can sometimes get unpleasant. That really happened to me only once in the years I've been on Twitter. I did a segment on 60 Minutes talking about the use of ketamine by EMTs and paramedics for sedating people who were being detained by the police, and the unfortunate consequences, which is a very high incidence of respiratory difficulties and a number of very high profile deaths. I tweeted out simply the link to when 60 Minutes posted that segment. I tweeted out the link to that segment with a little comment about it. I was then swamped by responses, largely from emergency room docs who use ketamine all the time and thought they were being attacked, or by anesthesiologists, many of whom wanted to make clear that they didn't think that a psychiatrist had anything to say about the use of ketamine for what nominally and mistakenly gets called excited delirium by the police. I elected, as I typically do, not to respond to any of those. That didn't seem like a very helpful strategy to try to engage with an angry mob, basically. It went on for about a week, and then it disappeared. but it's out there, and you'll tweet something that to you looks innocuous, but to someone else or some other group of people seems highly inflammatory, and they're going to come after you. And if that's going to keep you up at night, maybe an active Twitter account is not for you. It's not going to happen often, particularly if you're careful, but it can happen. It's a reality of the world out there.
Yeah, I want to echo what Paul just said. I've never been the victim of that. What did you call it? Crowing or
Mobbing.
mobbing? Thanks. But you do have to be thoughtful about which tweets you respond to, and which you just ignore. And I can't. I just try to, because what I'm about is making sure that, or trying to promote the ideas and get people thinking and talking. That's kind of the stance that I take. But I'm not going to get into arguments. It's not productive.
Yeah, never recommended. We have someone's hand raised. Would you like to contribute?
I'll just add something here. I think also so a lot of my research focuses on health disparities, particularly adversities faced by the LGBTQ community. So I think if you're a part of a minoritized group, unfortunately, you will be the target of many hateful tweets. And I don't respond to those. Even and additionally including pronouns in my profile, people will randomly remark about that negatively. So I think to Dr. Applebaum's point, if that is something that is going to keep you up at night, it's certainly a consideration. I think, and to the earlier points, if this is something that you've worked through and this has been your lived experience your whole life, it doesn't, it's kind of at this, it's not great to see. I don't love it. And also I know it's going to happen. I do, if I see something from a particular person. There was actually even someone at another institution who was sort of writing in things to a lot of things that were about, posts that were about LGBTQ mental health, sort of saying these were taking like a victim narrative and how is that helpful? I don't block the person immediately, because if you block someone right away, that can kind of alert them, especially if they're in like an angry or an emotion or that mob mindset. But I will do a soft block later. So if I have someone who continually shows up in my replies with hateful comments, maybe like a month later or not right when they do, I'll block them, and then I just won't appear on their timeline anymore. And I feel like that would probably be applicable to if you can identify any particular person. I also sometimes include a caveat at the end if I'm tweeting about something related to diversity that says something like, if you're going to show up in my replies, with X, Y, and Z comments, I invite you to first consider your implicit bias. And sometimes that can help.
And someone just mentioned to us in the comments, which is completely accurate, that it is possible to report to Twitter harassing comments. And Twitter has a policy ultimately for suspending or removing people who are offenders in that regard.
I think the only last thing I would add is, I think this came up earlier, is how do people who are not on Twitter see your tweets? So I just remind people, I think it's a nice segue, is that you can protect your tweets if you feel like you don't want to necessarily engage with too many people besides people who are following you and that you've confirmed. So that might be a way if you are, worried about that. Because I do want to remind people that if you just Google people's names, their Twitter feeds do come up. And so I've actually had people who are not on Twitter, remark about something. They were Googling them, a PubMed article, and then their Twitter feed, showed up. And so they saw a comment. So just as we've said before, anything you don't want out in the world, just don't tweet it.
Yes, we have another question actually. Has anyone ever reached out to a journalist directly via Twitter? And can you talk about direct contacting in general? Do you guys suggest that at all? Getting into a private setting, a private message?
I usually ask for the questions via email, and then I add one of our awesome media people to the thread or forward it to them. If there's some journalists that we've worked with a lot that we know, and if we know the outlet, but it's really helpful to consult with someone like Carla around that, I would say.
Great.
Yeah, I have not reached out to journalists on Twitter, but as I said, I've had people reach out to me by virtue of seeing a tweet on a particular topic. So it is clear it's something that journalists use a lot, both to ascertain sources and to disseminate their work. So they're there. Most journalists are very active on Twitter.
So to direct contact, for anybody out there that doesn't know, you can direct message someone. You don't have to reply to an exact tweet. You can actually direct message. It's not suggested in this field. You can, whatever you need to say, you can say it in a public forum. But all you have to do is go to the message icon under their profile. It's a little mail symbol, and that will give you a private message. If they're not following you, though, or you're not following back, they might not see it. In order for it to be directly visible, just like other platforms, it will go to a general mailbox. It will go to their primary mailbox if they are directly following you. So there's a risk to that. And like you said, there's all type of risks involved with that. So it's not heavily suggested to direct message your colleagues, your peers, or anybody at this panel. I saw a question that I would like to pose to everyone here about Twitter polls. It is it's a poll, it's the survey system that is online for Twitter, and you're able to keep it for 5 minutes and even up to 7 days to get the results. Do any of you guys use that?
Yeah, I've definitely used them, particularly if I'm engaging an audience about or starting a thread. I've also used them as part of a social audio platform where I was on Clubhouse. We were having a conversation. I said, okay, let's do a poll right now about this. And that way you can use it as a conversation starter in a different way.
Yeah, engagement is important. So polling and having people see that they have a say, whether it's in the percentage of the results or whether it's participating, I don't think you can make that visible. But yeah, no, any type of engagement is important. Dr. Cohen showed the analytics. So the more people that see it, the more people are able to click on it, the more people are able to give the little heart that they like it or reply to it and share with the world.
I can share a poll real quick.
Yes, please.
So I think this might be interesting to a lot of people in person. Are you currently seeing clients in person? And you can see, so I had it open for 24 hours, 138 people voted. Of course, you know, this is super scientific. There's no sample bias, as I'm sure everyone here would agree. And so you can get a sense, again, like this, I think, because for me, a lot of this is about communicating with the public and increasing awareness around mental health. So I want to do this to increase engagement because it's really why I'm on the platform. I don't think that some of my colleagues, maybe who are more focused, it wouldn't fit for everyone. You have to figure out if it fits for you. I do enjoy them though.
Yeah, I've worked in entertainment field, so it's definitely something that we like to utilize. I see it on the panelists, trying to engage in different articles or even just different topics like Jeff just showed. So I definitely think it's a very useful tool. Does anybody else use it here? No? All good, all good. There's plenty of tools to use. Like I said, the DM, and there's plenty of tools that you don't have to use. We didn't touch on it, but again, there's things like the popular TikTok and Snapchat. They have the Twitter fleet. I know that Dr. Cohen uses that. Actually, the Psychiatric page, we'd like to utilize that more going forward. But yeah, there's different ways to get people engaged in your content, not just pressing the share button. So once again, if you guys would like to contact the department, or you'd like to contact me for just the, let me get the share on there, please. All right. Oh, there it is. Okay, share screen. So if you'd like to contact us, oh, actually, let's go to a fun tweet that we didn't see. Keep the conversation going. Leverage Twitter at your next conference and use it as an icebreaker. People love seeing their efforts on social media have an impact. So I posted up a little fun tweet that Dr. Cohen put up. It's again, we touched on it before. We're not trying to all like joke, but we can keep it light, and that's okay. And so there's GIFs, there's memes that people like to share, just like on other platforms, just to keep it a little light. And yeah, people like to see that their work is making rounds, that it's reverberating, that it's making waves. So it goes a little bit beyond giving the little like button, just showing that there's a live person out there engaging with their content. And so, like I said before, we're the Office of Communications. This is brought to you by Columbia Psychiatry, and Linda Rosenberg is our Executive Director of External Relations. That's at the New York State Psychiatry Institute, Columbia University. Then we have my supervisor, Carla Cantor. She's Director of Communications, NISP, Columbia University. And I am your moderator, bringing this all together, the Associate Director of Digital Content Strategy. And I was happy to moderate this. If there's any more questions, we have a few more minutes. That's fine. We can definitely address those. But if you have something more advanced, something that we can't cover, please email me. It's right here at the bottom. Need more help? And I would be happy to do that for you.
It looks like there was a question around could people, and I'm not sure if they meant the audience or panels, but maybe we can do both. If people want, they could put their Twitter handles into the chat.
Sure. Yes, all that's available. Again, if you would like to go on the Curie, the search Curie, just like a search engine, you can type in Columbia Psych, and a lot of these people will pop up from their latest tweets to their most exciting tweets. The algorithm will pick that up and bring that to you. And a lot of these people are already on the suggested names that we put to follow. That will be in the presentation. Again, you can request that on my email address that's in the presentation. I also sent a mass email this morning to the attendees, and that's my email account as well. So if you'd like to reach to me, I already have a few people reaching to me to get the presentation. We're more than happy to do that. All right, I'm getting ready to do that right now. I'm getting ready to send that to all our attendees. Is there anything else that we'd like to touch on? We have a few more minutes.
There was a question in the chat that I tried to answer.
Yes, please.
Copyright issues of posting your article.
That's a good one. That's a great one.
And there could be. So you have to, I mean, speaking as an editor, I would just check with the journal.
So Lisa, for people will frequently post screenshots of the title and authors of an article, sometimes some or all of the abstract. As a journal editor, do you think there's a problem with that as well?
No. It's just because that's all publicly available, generally publicly available on PubMed. It's just that, you know, everybody, I think people are probably aware that there's a big issue now with open access versus not open access, NIH funded studies, and it's a dicey issue in the world of publishing. And so each, you know, journals have different rules and requirements, and you just want to make sure you're following them. But certainly an abstract or author list would not be a problem. And you could put a link to a PubMed link or a link to the journal's website. It's just that when you try to get the article, you'll hit a paywall if you're not if you don't have if a person doesn't have access. I know at Psych Services and other journals, we generally have a year where people can't can't access the articles unless they're in their they have specific access through their institution. But when there's an article that's very popular on Twitter or something that is there might be some more interest, I get them to take down the paywall. So there's ways to influence that, but you just have to be careful. And it's easy to find out what you're allowed to do or not.
I would just add that I think it is good practice that if you are tweeting about an article to also tag the, definitely the first author on it. I think people are, if you are citing people's work, they want to know about it, and that also helps engage. You want to know the thoughts of the people who've been involved in the study, or as Dr. Cohen showed us with his example, if there's not enough in the characters, you can tag it on the photo if you do take a picture of an abstract or something like that.
And just building on that, I would also tag the journal. And this is, I'm speaking more to psychology versus psychiatry journals, but in tagging them, I've noticed like many of them will then retweet what you're sharing. Because I mean, ultimately, I think there are issues around copyright and access, and we all have to figure out where we stand. But ultimately, we probably all want to help people, and we all want to share knowledge and information, and that's kind of my frame of looking at this.
It's good for everybody. I mean, when someone's work is promoted, that person is going to likely be happy, and the journal's going to be happy, and they'll retweet, and so your impact increases.
Yes, definitely. And thank you so much for everyone being here. We're going to be signing off. I really appreciate all the panelists. I was impressed before. I'm even more impressed now. I'm not surprised by that, and I'm sure the rest of the audience feels the same way. Again, I have emailed everyone in this registry the presentation. I hope that's useful to everyone. I hope everybody gets inspired to bring more ideas and content to their Twitter accounts based on the superstars that were on this Zoom call. I also would, so if you want me to personally email that to you, please email me at vincent.sanders@nyspi.columbia.edu. That's also in the presentation. That's also, again, in the mass email that I sent. You could also ask me in the chat. I'll gladly put that there. So then we also, and you can get me on LinkedIn. I'm Vincent Sanders. You can also get the panelists on LinkedIn. They're also there. I could send it there. And also, if you have any feedback, please send me some feedback. Send the panelists feedback, any ideas that you would like us to host for another panel, for another webinar. And again, we would be happy to do so. So again, my name is Vincent Sanders. I'm the moderator of this panel. And I appreciate you all being here, and we will take care for now.